everybody for joining today. As you know, this is the CliffsNotes book club. We officially have changed the name. Although my son reminded me last night, he goes, don't you call it the spoiler club? Because he can't get over the fact that like we ask people, we say you don't have to read the book, but we tell you what the book's about. Mm-hmm. And so he's thinking like novels, you know, he's like, you just tell people what the book is about. You just spoil it for everybody. And I was like, no, it's not those kind of books. It's not like a novel that we're discussing. So that's his version of what I do once a month here is the spoiler club. But we, as I just said, we don't expect you to have read the book. At least one person has. And so Jerry is our facilitator for today. And Eric, well, maybe you can say a little bit of an intro too in just a minute, because we're really excited that you're able to pop in, and we can just share your connection in just a minute. So Mendello Consulting sponsors this. It's totally free for everyone. And it's really just a way to bring the community together and talk about current things that we know our clients care about, and just to keep us in the know and up to speed on different models and concepts and books that will help us in our work with our clients and just help us personally too. So we do leadership training, team development, and virtual coaching. All right, so today we are going to be talking about reinventing diversity. And as always, we'll kick it off around 8:15-ish. We'll go until about 9 o'clock, and Jerry has a bunch of really good information, statistics, and just some key points that we're pulling out. There's a ton of information in this book. So I think it was the hardest thing with this book is just to pull out some of the key concepts that we think this group would care about. And then at 9 o'clock, we're looking to ask all of you the so what? How would you apply it to your work? What kind of ways have you already applied these concepts? What has worked? What hasn't worked? And then at 9:15, we'll do what we call the shameless plugs, where if you have a workshop that you want to advertise, put it out there, or if you have a job announcement or you're looking for a job, whatever it may be, we'll discuss it around 9:15, and then we'll always close by 9:30. All right, Jerry, take it away. Who are you, and what are we talking about today?
Okay. So why don't we go to the
Sure.
What I want to do is I want to go talk about the author's journey and look at the demographics and trends, why diversity programs fail, understanding and mastering bias. There's 9 steps that he outlines for addressing unconscious bias. Also transforming cultural competency and competitive advantage. Creating a culture that works. There's 8 phases of organization and community change management model, and 12 building blocks for the culture. There are also a series of, in the appendices, other materials that you may be interested in. They're based on his work. There is one thing that I did add at the end, and that is he has, I think, 8 steps for change management. I added a 9th one because I've learned in change management, communications is a key experience. So I'm going to go first about the author's journey. He is he had a workshop in Louisiana, and that workshop, their majority of the people were African American, and there was one white gentleman, and they were having a discussion of bias and prejudice, and they were discussing what was going on with the Ku Klux Klan and how the blacks had been affected by their activities. The gentleman that was white sat in the back of the class, didn't say anything until right before lunch. And then what he said, he said, you know, what you've been talking about is my grandfather and my father. They taught me how to fish, hunt, and farm. They were members of the Ku Klux Klan, and I had no idea that we were doing any of that. So based upon, and when they broke for lunch, one of the black gentlemen went over and had lunch with the white man and had a very good discussion. So Ross said that he shifted his approach from oppression-based model to a model where you're not trying to fix people, but it's transformational. It's based upon getting people to understand their view and the view of others and how they express it. It's transformational, and that's what this book is about. He also, somebody questioned, and he said, Ross is white, by the way. He said, somebody asked him, well, how can you do diversity if you're white? How can you do that training? And he said, let me tell you a story. I'm Jewish. I lived in Baltimore. And every morning I had to go to my father's or grandfather's store before they got there and clean off the graffiti before they got there to work. He said also I became aware that my black friends could not go to stores with me. So I'm aware of having prejudice and bias and observing it. And almost everybody has in some shape or form. So race should not be a determinant of the ability to do this work. He also said that most people develop different ways of looking at the world because of the narrative of the world they work in. One of the key parts of this book is that we live in culture. And culture is the water that we live in. We are not aware many times of what we think because of the culture that we swim in. It was a function of their cultural narrative, the story that they've been told, they've been educated about. And it's all subconscious. So he is a person who has worked in, at least in the book this time, of 40 different states, of 40 different countries. He's working for Fortune 500 firms. So he has a wide variety. He uses social science and neurocognitive theory. And one of his mentors was Robert Allen. And his construct was that you don't change people just because they're educated or they're motivated. You change because the culture they are part of begins to call them to a new behavior. So this book is a lot about culture and a lot about change, but not necessarily changing the person, but changing the culture that they operate in. The next one is key diversity, and if you don't mind touching that, okay. Diversity. I thought that these definitions were enlightening because really diversity is, I'm not going to read them, is that you have different types of people, different ways of thinking, and you're going to use those aspects of those differences for the best use of society, the best use of the people, essentially. Inclusion is once you have those diverse populations, part of your organization, you make them part of the fabric of your organization. You essentially include in the decision making, the responsibility, the leadership, and then use that capability to create an organization that is culturally competent, intelligent, and culturally flexible. And cultural flexibility is develop a level of competency in understanding the needs of the various people and working with them and use that knowledge to achieve the most effective impact. So, and you use those skills in everything that the organization does. So part of this is strategic resource management, going from getting the people into the finding who you need, getting them into the organization, and then using them appropriately. The next one, the demographics. If you look at the demographics, that America is if you could touch all of them, I'd appreciate it. That happens is that the whites are becoming less of a majority in the U.S. 90% of the population in the U.S. over the next 40 years will come from people of color. the white Western civilization emphasis will significantly decrease by 2050. If you could go to the workforce dynamics, white males will become less prominent in the workforce. In fact, by 2010, 15 to 20% of new hires entering the workforce were native-born white males. And when it comes to people getting hired, according to the Glassdoor, found that 76% of this job seekers wanted to work in places where there's diversity. Business impact. We cannot afford to not address the diversity, change the demographics. The combined earning power of African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, and natural Native Americans will double that of the white population. What that means is that you're going to have a changing in the marketplace. People like to buy from people that look like them. So when you're hiring people in the future, you're going to need people, a diverse labor force, to market these populations. Also, your price are going to have to mirror their need.
Sorry,
Okay.
Jerry, there was one more.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. I got it. I could. The next slide. Why do diversity programs fail? He says that basic Black History and Women History months fail because they rarely ever change the culture of the organization. He likens it to the pillow theory. You give the present, you have this particular event, it makes an impression, you pull your hand out of the pillow, and it leaves no impression. So it's oversimplification of diversity issues contribute to problems because we often look to solve problems rather than change the culture. He talks about a mentoring program that was initiated by a law firm, and it was initiated for African Americans and minorities that entered the law firm. Well, it had the opposite effect. And the fact is that people then thought that population wasn't up to being in the law firm. So what they did is they then changed that program to offer mentoring to all new lawyers, not just the minorities. They actually did the mentoring to help them, thinking it would help them enter that professional easier, but it backfired. We often fail to see that individual behaviors are part of the community and system and culture that they live in. We are immersed in the different systems we live in. So our individual behaviors are actually a mirror of what's going on in the larger society. Sometimes these programs are the projects of du jour, which we've all been involved in. People get interested in them, and then all of a sudden they go away. And tips and techniques are useful, but they have to be applied. Know why you're applying them. They just can't be out there hanging, and people apply them for some reason. They got to know why they're using them. Those are the major thoughts he has about why they fail. We're getting into this topic, and that is understanding bias. We all have biases. Most biases are not intended to be discriminate. I think it was Ross in his Everyday Bias said we all have biases. It becomes a prejudice when you act on it. Biases have been turned into a prerogative. I mean, a pejorative statement. We have long used them to survive. We use biases for heretics. They are things that I once talked to a principal at Booz Allen, and she said, I always go to this one person. That's my go-to person. I said, you know what? That's a bias that you have. And you're not utilizing the resources of the organization effectively because you're not building your staff. we the what I thought was interesting, the implicit association test from Harvard. 36% of the Muslims test anti-Muslim, and 48% of the black demonstrate a pro-white or anti-black implicit bias. And Ross says that's because the dominant view impacts the non-dominant view. It becomes part of um, um, becomes part of their subconscious. Um, we, if you look at the sentences here, we have a tendency, we as human beings, to fill in the blanks. You can read those sentences and you can probably fill them in quite easily. Well, you do the same thing when you're observing somebody or some situation. You don't have all the facts, but you start making assumptions based upon what went on before. If you close your eye, if you look around the room that you're in, how many things do you see that are red? Just count them very quickly. Okay. Now close your eyes, and how many things do you remember that were green? Well, that's a bias, because what you're doing is you're like everything else. You focus on things that your your mind wants to focus on, and forget about everything else that's going on around you. So the next thing is next slide. Another discussion. Can you think of a situation where a client has become aware of their own bias towards a person or a group? What was the situation? How did they gain this awareness? What did they learn? Has anybody had that kind of experience with their clients?
I'll just open it back up to the group. Mariana was saying the example that you just said before was, it's like the gorilla experiment, the
Right,
gorilla in the back of the room. So what
right,
do you focus on?
right.
And as you and I talked about this before, Jerry, the bias is there to help us, because if we could scan the room and know every single color of every single thing, then that's not high functioning either.
Well, the human body takes in 11 million senses a second, only can focus on 40, and makes the decision on about 7.
Yeah, yeah,
So if we didn't do that, we would be overloaded. So
right.
biases help us essentially manage the world that we are in.
Mm-hmm.
I think most the 9 steps for managing unconscious bias, I think we've touched on a lot of them already. The fact is, you got to know yourself. You got to be curious. Yeah, you got to ask questions. You got to broaden your who you're getting information from. Set up some criteria on the success of how you're addressing what you might see as biases, and ask for feedback. Much like we were just having a discussion, husband and wife having a discussion of their observation of the husband's activities. You got to, as Covey would say, you got to look through the telescope at the opposite end. Look at the other person. Put a flashlight on yourself. So.
Mm-hmm.
So those are 9 different ways in which you can do that. And then the next one is creating, if you can put them all up at the same
Sure,
time.
sure.
Yeah. Um, Creating a culture that works is that you got to develop a new mindset. Um, and they become habits within the culture of the organization. Um, you can begin by looking at diversity and inclusion. The competency is not as something to be fixed, but a set of distinctions. And distinction in this case is capabilities and competencies that our organization can master to increase productivity and success. It becomes part of the success of the firm. Has a business reason. Uh, Most of our behaviors in the organization stand in the way of us trying to address unconscious bias. We need to find ways to surface that and drive and surface those unconscious drivers so that we can address them. Just like the principal I was talking to, she was going to the same person, wasn't conscious of the fact that there were other people that could do the work. Um, we need to look at how we fundamentally change how people relate to each other and get the best people to do the job. look at the competencies and capabilities that they have. We need to look at a culture of change. Life without change is a change. So we need to look at how we can influence the change of the culture of the organization. Uh, and we have to develop objective measures for individuals and for the corporation so that we can measure how successful we are at doing this. Okay, so it's cultural change. Next slide. He has 8 phases of organization and community change. Um, and the first one is by developing a team of diverse people to guide the process. He actually has a case study in the book where he used that in a hospital and used it to change the culture of the hospital and how they worked with the community and inside. And it went from a hospital that was $10 million in revenue loss per year to a profit of $10 million. Uh, phase 2 is actually doing a cultural analysis, and the next slide looks at the types of questions he asks on that.
Sorry, did you want me to go there?
No, I won't
Not
go
yet.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
Develop a trust by determining who delivers a message. You need to have, this is a key point of all change management, is communications. Have people who are trusted to deliver the message. It may not be the CEO, that may be one person, but when I was doing work in the environmental area, I had people that were electricians uh, give presentations to electricians or the carpenters and explaining why sustainability was an important thing. It's the same concept. You have what we call Josie or Joe Sixpack give the presentation because they trusted them. You have to develop an overall strategic plan that outlines what you're going to do. You have to have an educational program and a development program. You have to have training for people. Training is skills, awareness is education. Build a structure and a system to encourage and sustain this. It's not a one-off. Develop performance measures. What gets measured gets done. And you have to regularly stop, assess what you're doing, and then go back and see if you need to readjust it. Once I was getting my MBA and I was taking a strategic planning course, and I had done strategic planning for about 4 years, and the professor gave a stepwise progression, and I raised my hand and said, that's fine, but it's spaghetti because it's not a straight line in doing this. So that's important. You go back and you go forward in these steps. Next is are 12 areas that he looks at when doing a cultural analysis. And what I did is I pulled out examples of the questions that he asks. The book has for each one of these about 10 questions. So you can actually choose from if you like, from his questions and develop your own instrument. As it says, you have to have an organizational focus, leadership, structure, financial health has to be looked at, internal and external focus. What's the organizational mood? And the mood is like a climate, whereas motion is like the weather. So a mood is essentially what's going on throughout the organization. What's their relation internal and external to the organization, to the community that they serve, to the stakeholders? What's their feedback process? They're actually have surveys or focus groups to identify what's going on. What knowledge is being shared? What's the history of tradition? A lot of what is part of culture is went on before. Who formed the organization? Why was it formed? Well, those particular paradigms may not hold in the current environment. How does the organization learn? And what are some of the personal skills that are missing or people have in the organization that can be used to help the organization succeed? So I do management assessments. I have usually 7 questions that I ask, and through that process, you can usually determine what's going right or what's going wrong in the organization, and that's what he's doing here.
Yeah, this
So,
is so helpful, Jerry, just to pull out some of those key questions. I feel like this is the money slide right here. And even if you're not doing a diversity initiative, these are just fantastic questions to
and
pick
you
out
just
what's going on with the culture.
yeah, just to these are only these are
A
one
third
of
of it.
10.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's got a
That's
whole set
amazing.
that you can draw
Yeah.
on.
That's worth the book right there.
The book, there are slides on the back that are the appendices that you might want to look at. They also give you more information on his process. They're very they're, I, they are based upon his book. They're not my thoughts. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let me wrap up here. Jerry, thank you so much for, again, just taking the time. This book is so rich with information. And so you really pulled out those key components that I think this group can grab and run with. And then hopefully, you might be if you're doing these types of initiatives, you might be motivated to buy the book. Like I said, that list of questions is just money right there. That's so key to asking some good questions to get at the data that you're looking for. You really appreciate you guys jumping on today. And if anybody wants to stick around and learn Miro a little bit, I'm happy to stick around for another 5-10 minutes and help you with that tool. Otherwise, we will see you next month. All right, bye. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.